welcome to this wonderful Facebook Live. I'm Lisa Hobman.
And I'm Eilidh Beaton.
There you go. And we are chatting today, all things audiobooks. So my profession, if you like, is writing romance novels. And Eilidh, tell us what you do.
I read those novels out.
Beautifully.
Thank you very much. Well, when you've got a lovely story to read, it makes it a whole lot easier.
Thank you. Right, so this week is audiobook appreciation week or month. Is it month? Initially, we've got a question here that says, this week we're celebrating all things audio. What do you both love about audiobooks? Eilidh, would you like to start?
Sure. Well, I guess because I come at it from two different angles, I obviously love reading them out, and I love listening to them because it just means that you can gobble up more stories, really. So when I'm out walking my dog or cooking or anything that, tidying up, all of those kind of things that it's really nice to be able to be told a story at the same time, so you never get bored, really. So yeah, I love that about them, and I love how if it's a book that's done well, it can add to what has been written as well, and can just be really great entertainment.
Absolutely, I totally agree. And I think as an author, there's something incredible about hearing your words brought to life with accents and with emphasis and things like that. It's almost like watching a movie, but obviously without the images. But an audiobook for me brings the book to life. It brings the characters to life and the settings, which helps you build up an image in your mind about the setting and everything like that. And it's like you say, really, really entertaining, but so relaxing as well to listen to an audiobook. And it's quite a nice escape from sort of like, sometimes you don't really feel like listening to music, so I listen to audiobooks in my car, and I like the fact that you can just you can pick up on a story and drive along, and instead of sort of bobbing your head along to music, you're actually engrossed in someone's words and in someone else's setting, and I find that really quite a fantastic thing. I think audiobooks are an incredible invention.
Yeah, and it is amazing. The driving is such a perfect time, isn't it? And one of the most lovely things I hear from sometimes from people is when they stop their car and they have to stay for a bit longer and don't want to get out of the car straight away.
Definitely. When you reach a bit that's quite, that you're really engrossed in, and you don't want to get out of the car to put the shopping away. You just want to stay there in that little cocoon listening. It's lovely. I really like them. I think they're fantastic. And Eilidh, what do you enjoy most about your job as a voice artist and audiobook narrator?
Well, it's just it's pretty great on all fronts, really, because I love to start off with reading the book, and you have to get so fully immersed in it to hopefully tell the story well, and then you get this great opportunity to create loads of characters. And you can be doing that while you're doing all sorts of things. So when I'm walking my dog, when I'm not listening to another audiobook, generally I'll be kind of looking slightly odd and because it always feels like it's a good time, when you're outside and you're moving and things, characters start to come up, and you can start really building them in your mind. And when those characters click, and when you can really start to see images of where you're describing, it starts to feel quite magical. And when you're in the studio and you can see all of those characters and you can see the setting and you're telling the story and the characters so well that you can you have to be entirely in the moment. And there's such a huge thing at the moment, isn't there, about how we can best find living in the moment. And for me, reading audiobooks is a brilliant way of doing that, because if you're not in the moment, then you've sort of lost the strand of it a bit. You know that you need to go back.
It sounds a little bit like your sort of description there sounds a little bit like the experience I have when I'm writing, because I'll sit at the laptop and or the PC, and I'll be writing, and the characters are having conversations in my head. and sometimes I have to stop and I have to actually get myself involved in the conversation, because that way I can feel how the words would sound to a particular person, and what sort of tone of voice they'd be using, and I have to have the conversations out loud. And I suppose with you, that's actually what you're doing. You're putting yourself on both sides of, for example, an argument, or both sides of some kind of conflict, or even a romantic situation, and you're sort of having to step into both pairs of shoes at the same time, which is a little bit strange, I suppose, but
yeah. Totally. Totally strange. It is really interesting, that overlap, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
Writing in the, but yeah, and sometimes you definitely can't be very black or white when you're doing it, because of having to totally have both sides of, if it's an argument or whatever it is, so they're both getting their truth out.
And when you're recording, do you record scene by scene, or do you sort of record, for example, if it is an argument, do you record one character's side of the argument and then the other character, and then sort of somehow splice them together? How do you do that?
No, you just do it totally as you're going.
Wow.
Yeah.
Gosh, so you really are hopping from one head to another head in a flick of a second, and you're sort of creating both sides of that in the moment. I think that's amazing. I was sort of thinking you'd have to, record all the sides of one character and then all this, but I suppose that wouldn't work. But I don't know, that's, for some reason, that's how I had it in my head. But I think that's amazing. I think you do an amazing job then for, changing characters and changing and remembering whose voice goes with which character, which voice goes with which character and things like that.
Yeah, the preparation is really important. So if you kind of went into the book and you didn't know the characters, and that would feel incredibly stressful, because you can't then really sort of dip authentically into the characters, because you're just going to be like, haven't quite got a handle on who that is. Yeah. But I'll kind of spend quite a lot of time on each character, and I've got those voice clips as well. So especially if it's a more minor character who maybe crops up a few times during a book, I'll have my voice note there, and I can listen if I'm feeling a little bit like, oh, have I got
what
that?
What did they sound like before?
Yeah, exactly.
That's
so
good.
You can stop to do that sort of thing. But otherwise, you just kind of keep on going. And I think that as well as sort of being less time impactful, it also means that you can hopefully get the flow. And it's quite weird. You sort of see it as a bit of a like with the images and everything. I'll be seeing those characters in my mind's eye. I'm sort of like planted in, a film almost.
Yeah.
So those characters, I can sort of see them.
Again, there's that overlap, because that's how. Because I almost, when I'm writing, I always feel like I'm watching a movie in my mind, and I'm writing down what I'm seeing happening. So it's a similar kind of thing, I suppose, isn't it? Yeah. Very interesting. There's a question for me here as well, which says, how does it feel to have a narrator bring your characters to life in an audio? Has anything surprised you about a narrator's take on a character? And I have to say, I wouldn't say things have surprised. Well, no, I would say things have surprised me. For example, when I first heard the very first book that you narrated for me, which was Dreaming Under an Island Sky, and I heard that, yes, oh my word, and I heard that your narration. I must admit, and I might sound a little bit of an emotional wuss here, but I did get really emotional, because it was just amazing that someone else had got what I was trying to portray. And it's like he reached inside my head and thought, yep, she sounds like that, he sounds like that, that's how they would react. And and it just felt, again, like I say, like this movie, but without the screen. The movie is in your head, but the voices are there, and the stories there being brought to life. And I just think it's fantastic. And I think so going back to what the most surprising part of that is, as I say, I'm surprised that someone was able to, or that you were able to sort of jump inside my head and see what I was thinking when I was creating these characters and creating this story. So that is just, I mean, it was a big thing for me. It was a really big emotional thing for me to hear my first one. And obviously now we're up to Coming Home to the Highlands, which is another new series and a whole raft of new characters, which again just sound exactly how I imagined they would, which is fantastic. It's brilliant. It really is. As I get all emotional, but it's very true.
That's so amazing. That's just so amazing to hear, because that's it. It's sort of that feels like that's what it's all about for me. It's getting that, hoping that I'm going to be able to get inside, your head enough so that it's actually being truthful to what you're, because you obviously put hours and hours and months into creating these stories, and yeah, to hopefully
because I suppose you've not like the writer, you've not only got the author to think about, you've got the audience to think about as well. And are they gonna, if they've, for example, if they've read the book before listening to the audio, which I know a lot of my readers have done, they've read the book and then they've listened, they wanted to read it again, but they've thought, well, I'll give the audio book a go this time. And so they do. And so I suppose you've got that. Again, I suppose it's like when you've read a book and then you watch the movie, you never know whether you're going to get what you expect. And sometimes with the movie it doesn't work, but I know with the audiobooks it's definitely working because people are loving them. So brilliant. It's so good.
You definitely think about the listener, especially because I listen to a lot of audiobooks as well, so you kind of get that as a bit of a helping hand to knowing, because it's such an intimate experience, isn't it, listening to a book. And so you kind of can't go, I'm definitely aware of how much you can push things in terms of loudness, largesse of characters.
Yes,
so things can jar quite easily, so being mindful of that always feels very important as well.
Brilliant. I think you're doing an amazing job, but I am your number one fan, so there you go. So I think we've probably touched on this next question a little bit, but it says, could you take us through the steps you undertake to prepare for narrating a book? What do you do once you receive a manuscript? So I know we've talked a little bit about it, but tell us again, because I just like listening to you.
Well, so I get the big fat manuscript on my iPad, and I've got a notepad, and I read it like really slowly, and so that trying to, I can imagine with the writing process being quite similar in that thing of waiting for all the strands to sort of settle in. So yeah, read it really, really slowly, and I write down all of the characters, and I write down everything that each character says about themselves, about what other people say about the characters, any added things, any of the subtext that pops up that are my thoughts about the characters as I'm going along. And after I've spent a bit of time with the characters, then I'll start thinking about how they're going to be sounding. And sometimes, you'll think they'll pop up straight away and you're like, okay, yeah, no, that's, and sometimes it'll take a bit of time, and sometimes you need to go for a walk and have a think about them. And then I'll record each of those characters so that I'm just all set and ready to go. And also I'll mark up the script a little bit. I don't mark it up massively because you don't want to be sort of, you know, too bamboozled by lots of colour and stuff on your screen. But
Yeah.
things like, you know, if Juliet whispers, then I'll put a W at the start of the line, just and have, you know, if somebody's going to be shouting, so I'll have little code for different things. So I'll have an S for shout and W for whisper, and I'll write little things about it always feels like it's quite important to have changes of pace at times. And when you see that there are, you know, if there's if we're going to have a change of a thrust of what, you know, whatever's going on, then I'll mark the new thought. Or and I quite often at the start of a chapter will write a little note about what's coming up, so I'm sort of, I've got that in the back of my mind. It's not so much that it's forefront, but it's just sort of there, you know,
just a preparation in like laying the groundwork for it.
Yeah, exactly. And then once all that's done, when I first started, because it's quite a long time now since I recorded my first audiobook in 2003 or 2005, something like that, when, you know, books were still in cassette.
Yeah. Oh, I remember cassettes.
Yeah. So and then I did and then I did a few more, and it wasn't until a bit further down the line that I started doing a lot more. But in the early stages, I would definitely read them through a couple of times. But now I've kind of, you know, got quicker at being able to sort of just dive straight in, and, you know, all of these things, it just takes time, doesn't it, to start for it all to, and so
I suppose the more you, it's like with anything, I suppose the more you do something, your own sort of process, you hone your own skills and your own process, don't you? And it just becomes, or supposedly you do. I'm not so sure I'm honing anything at the minute. I'm not being a very good writer at the moment, but yeah, I think it's one of those things. The more you do it, the better you get, really, and the more experienced you are. So you know what things that you've addressed in other, you know, like obstacles you've come across, and you know how to better address those then.
So true. Yeah, absolutely.
If only I'd take my own advice there. I'm struggling at the moment to find the time. I'm editing a manuscript at the moment, and I'm struggling to find, because obviously I run a bookshop now. I own a bookshop with my really good friend, which is amazing. But yeah, it takes up a lot of time, so I need to be stricter, and I'm not I'm not disciplined enough.
Oh, it's tricky, isn't it? Because what would your process when you're really in it and it's working well? What's your process at that time? You know, when you go back to moments when you felt like, oh, this is really working.
I think I tend to work best when if an idea hits, I need to write then. I'm not someone who can sort of sit down at 9 o'clock and say, right, I'm going to write until 12 and then I'll have my lunch and I'll write again from 1. I can't be prescriptive like that. I have to be in the creative frame of mind, and I have to sort of write when the inspiration hits, which unfortunately can be at the wrong time. You know, it can be, I can wake up in the middle of the night and have an idea, or, you know, I can be driving to work and I have an idea, and it's just, then I have to try and remember these things so that I can write them down and actually apply them to, you know, to what I'm doing. So, but I really admire the people who can just sit down at a particular time and say, I am now going to write. Do you find that with yourself? I mean, as far as the sort of creative process is concerned, do you find that sometimes you just haven't got the feeling? You know, you haven't.
Definitely. And probably if that, you know, if you're saying to yourself, oh, I've got to make sure that I'm doing it in these hours, but, you know, actually really that doesn't work for your creative, you know, juices flowing, then you're kind of tapping a, you know, square peg into a round hole, and maybe you just need to do that thing of at the moment, if it's not feeling like, and then it's frustrating because then that's like restricting things even more, isn't it?
Yeah, there's
Write
a lot of
notes to yourself in the middle of the night.
Well, yeah. I've got bits of paper scribbled
Oh my goodness,
illegible notes that I come back to the next day and I'll go, what on earth does that say?
I
Or it'll be
do
half a
that
sentence
so
and then I've
much
fallen back
as
to
well.
sleep. Which is great
Completely.
fun. Right, we have another question. Where are we? So it's me. Do you listen to your books on audio? If yes, do you still hear your words or do you treat it like it's someone else's work? That's actually a really interesting question. I think I do hear my words sometimes, but sometimes I'm a little bit taken back and I have these moments of, oh, I wrote that, which is quite bizarre. These moments of and I have to say it's because of how you've brought the character to life, or how you've brought the personality to life, and I sit there and I think, gosh, yeah, that I really can really imagine that person being like that and sounding like that, and I do listen to the audiobooks, to my own audiobooks. And the way I find it better is after the book's been out a while, because then it's like reading something new.
Yes. And also it kind of gives you that opportunity to look back at, like, because I can imagine the editing process is quite tricky because you're having to go into the minutiae and everything, and it's hard to sort of take the step back at that point, isn't it? Whereas a few months down the line, once it's all out there and you can see the arc again and all of that sort of stuff because somebody's reading it to you.
Yeah, it and I mean it's again it goes back to that, well, especially the series, that continuity and that like you're saying about having the voice notes for each character. It actually helps to listen to the audiobooks for when I'm writing, say, the next book in the series, because that reminds me of how a character sounds, and that's not something that they would say. I'll change that, so that is actually a really useful tool as an author. It really does help, because you get an essence with audiobook. You get an essence of what the character, not just how they sound, but how they what's the word, intonate, is that the right word? How they and so I think that, as I say, helps then for going forward for the next book, because you can word something and then you'll think, I'm not entirely sure that's how they would say that, and then you go back and you listen to the audiobook and you think, no, I do need to change that. So yeah, as I say, audiobooks are, they're as much as enjoyment, they're actually a really useful tool as well. So especially if you're writing a series. So yeah,
that's so interesting.
Yeah, it's but having, going on to that part about the thing where does it feel like someone else's work? As I said before, it does sometimes, but it's actually just really nice to listen, to have someone tell you your story. I don't know if that sounds a bit weird, but it is nice. It's like, I mean, being read to is just nice anyway. I think it's quite a nice experience, a relaxing experience. So yeah, but if it's your own book, even better.
Yeah, and you can, I imagine that thing of like when you're in the moment and you're writing it and it feels totally full and brilliant, and then when you take the step back and being like, oh, I'm not sure, was it did it work? I don't know.
Yeah.
And to have it verified,
that
it's a really great story and you've got great characters. It's
thank you. Well, you do the job of bringing them to life. So I've got another question here. Sorry, I keep looking down. I've got them scribbled on a bit of paper here. So for Eilidh, when narrating, are you able to enjoy the book like a reader, or is it hard to do so when you're focusing on the narration?
I suppose it's quite a different experience to reading a book normally, but it's a kind of a deeper way, I guess, because you're just so fully into it. So it's kind of reading on, you know, reading with extras in a way.
like on a different level, I suppose, really.
Yeah, because everything is kind of alive and.
But you're not. But I suppose unless it's when you first do you tend to, you say you get the manuscript, you read that through. Do you read that through first? You might have said this, and I can't remember now. But when you read it through first, do you read it through with a view to how you're going to manage the different characters, or do you just read it first as a book?
No, I'm definitely working when I'm reading it. So and the only difficult thing about narrating books is because you're always so active when you're reading them, whether you're prepping or narrating. I find it really hard to read, for relaxation now, whereas of course, I used to.
Yes. I know that feeling. That's really strange, because I feel the same about writing. Because, for example, when I'm writing, I can't read another romance novel. I have to read something completely different, like a crime novel or something like that, because or maybe even a classic, just because I find it really hard to focus on my own stuff if I'm reading someone else's stuff that sort of writes in the same genre as me. I suppose it's a similar kind of thing. Yeah.
Because if I'm I've got Hamnet on my bedside table, as I just love Maggie O'Farrell massively. I've just had it there, and I dip into it. But then I just it's just that difficult thing of like, oh, I'm working out how they all talk.
Yes.
And I'm spending so much time seeing everything about them, where they are.
Yeah.
And obviously normally when you read a book, you're imagining, but you're imagining in a slightly more
in a probably more of a removed way. You're not quite as, although you're involved in the story, you're not, like you say, you're not analysing everything as well. You're not analysing as much when you read for pleasure as you are when you read for work. So and I suppose it's like I did an editing course, a book editing course, but then I found that every time I read anything by anybody, if there was a spelling mistake, or because invariably it happens, people are human, but I unfortunately my eyes were drawn to it, and I would pick up immediately. Can't find them in my own work, that's why I have editors, but to look to read then and do that for pleasure when it's something you've done for either a course or I did it as a job for a short while, and it kind of takes the fun out of it for a while, but I totally understand that.
The same thing happened when I did a drama degree before I went to drama school, and so one of my modules was on analysing productions and going to see plays and analysing them. I just really it was great as a module, but it took so long to get out of the habit of analysing it and not just letting it all. One of the wonderful things about going to the theatre, isn't it? It's just letting it all kind of
and
doing it and just loving it and like, I wish I wasn't thinking about this thing. To enjoy them again.
Totally get that. I totally get that. That's really funny, because that's I can totally understand that. Right, we have another question. Lisa, has hearing your books as audiobooks ever changed the way you think about a character or a plot? Well, yes. As I was just saying, sometimes when you read a particular, I'm having this issue at the moment, actually. I won't go into details because obviously the book hasn't come out yet and it hasn't even gone off to the editor yet, but there are certain characters that when I've got to know them, when I've written them, and then I've listened to them on the audiobook, I've thought, right, okay, I've got an idea for the next book, and then when I've gone to write that idea, it's not felt quite right, so I've gone back again to the audiobook and I've thought, no, it's not working, like I was saying before. And so I have changed situations in the book because it just didn't fit right with the image that I'd built up of the character, both through writing and through listening. So I have definitely changed certain things. It's happening as we speak, actually. At the moment, I'm rejigging some things because they just didn't. The original version that I've written didn't quite sit properly with how the character came across. So I have you to thank for that, because that does it. As I said before, it's a really useful way of, I suppose, again, it's like I keep comparing it to TV and movies, but it's a very similar situation, because you learn about a character, you learn more about a character when you've got that other dimension to them, when they're not just on paper, and you've got that other dimension to them. It definitely brings them to life that little bit more. So I've learned more about my characters since listening to the audiobooks as well. So I think they are really, as much as I said before, as much for pleasure as for help as well. So it definitely makes a difference, definitely. And Eilidh, do you ever feel emotionally connected to a character that you're narrating? If yes, are you ever shocked, surprised, or delighted by the plot or actions of your character?
Yes, I get hugely emotionally involved, just completely. And when I'm when I'm doing the narration, I sort of, it's very all consuming. So outside of it, I'm still kind of thinking, how they, and because of in the process of sort of prepping for the characters, you sort of think about different scenarios of how they would respond in certain situations, and going like, and how would they walk, and how would they tie their shoelaces, and how would they emotionally respond to something or other, and so you can definitely then get those surprises, or those like, yes, this is all. And when it's really sort of working like, oh, I'm so kind of totally involved in this character, I totally understand why they would make those decisions. And then occasionally when it is like, oh, I'm not sure they would do that. Oh, I feel slightly uncomfortable with their decision there. It doesn't, that occasionally happens. And then that feels, but obviously get rid of that thought quite quickly.
I'm going to say, do you ever feel like, do you ever feel so passionate that you wish you could speak to the author and say, do you know what, this doesn't sit right with me? Do you ever wish that you could do that? Go on, you can tell us.
I have done a couple of times.
Have you?
I haven't, I haven't mentioned it, but yeah, that thing of like, I think, because that emotional investment does then mean that it's.
Well, I mean, because the characters aren't, at that point, the characters aren't just the authors; they're your characters as well. You've added a dimension to them yourself, so it is like, the characters belong to a lot of people, really. They belong to the author who created them, to the narrator who really brought them to life, and to the reader who's got this, this mental image of them. The characters have got a lot of work on their hands, really, to make a lot of people happy. So, and I think we do sort of feel like we own a little bit of them, I suppose. So
it's true. And getting that little bit of ownership, and that really helps as well when you've got, when that the author that you're working with really likes audiobooks as well. It sort of gives you that slight, a little bit more ownership, because you know that they're invested in the process as well.
Absolutely. One of the, I mean, this is just an aside, but when I was sort of listening to voice recordings of people for the audiobooks, yours, I must admit, yours jumped out immediately. I love your the voice note you sent me, your accent, when you're speaking in a Scottish accent. I just love that. I could listen to it forever. It's so, you've got such a lovely accent. It's so relaxing and so lovely. And how do you when you sort of reading it, when you're narrating a book where there are a lot of different accents, how do you prepare yourself? Do you ever have to sort of go back and go, oh, well, this person's maybe, I don't know, for example, this person's got a Scouse accent, I really need to go and gen up on what a Scouse accent's like again? Do you ever have to do that? Or?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So not so much Scottish accents, because you know that's
it's your background.
But but for other accents, definitely. So I've got loads of and I've always, since I've been about 3, I've been doing different accents. And so I've always, you know, when just thinking about Scouse accents, you know, when Bread was on in the that thing was absolutely just loving watching it. And the most important thing at that point as well was to be able to try and replicate all of the accents. And you know, I was chatting to somebody the other day about my daughter's 13, and she was talking about what happens when you're doing your A-levels and you've got all of these, you've got loads and loads of hours to make up, surely, because you can't be doing those 3 subjects all the time. And I was saying, well, you have study periods. And I was saying, and I did lots of studying, and also I would sometimes watch Neighbours.
Oh gosh, yeah, I used to love Neighbours.
And I was thinking at that moment, I was like, well, actually, that was probably more useful, you know, than doing that reading comprehension that I was supposed to be doing, really. And actually, I was, you know, turning up on my accent. So there are some accents that are definitely very easy to tap into, and there are some, you know, obviously not going to be able to tap into all of them anyway, but I try as hard as I can, and I've got lots of different apps where on that break them down. There's this thing called Arthur the Rat, which it brings up every sound. There once was a rat named Arthur, and it goes onto this little story, and it's supposedly got every sound that you can possibly have when you're speaking. So if you have somebody, so I've got loads of clips of anybody who I meet who's got an accent that I want to record, I'll say, would you mind reading this for me? And then I'll be able to tap into them like that. And then there are also various accent apps that I can listen to that breaks things down in lots of different ways. I can spend ages.
What would you say, what's been the most challenging accent you've had to replicate then? What do you think?
Oh, what has been really challenging? Sometimes it's quite challenging if there are things like a mix of Norwegian and Scottish. Those kind of things can be quite tricky, because you could end up like, and then you sort of work out, you kind of maybe go for one of the accents more than the other, and then just get like, choose a couple of sounds that you're going to slot in. I find I've been Newcastle accents I still find pretty tricky.
Funnily enough, I was going to ask you if you could do the whole Geordie sort of, because I love the accent so much, but I've tried to mimic it.
It's so hard, isn't it? And I'm getting closer, and it's one of those ones that I'm just like, right, it's on my, you know, I spend quite a lot of time, and I'm like, I'm really going to nail it.
You're going to master it. Yeah.
It's
one of those accents that, as I say, I love to listen to it. That and Northern Irish. I love those accents.
I love a Northern Irish accent.
Can't mimic it. Can't duplicate it at all.
What are your favourite ones to mimic?
I like Australian. I in my head I can do a really good Australian accent, but
because of Neighbours, probably.
Probably so. Neighbours and Home and Away, they've got a lot to answer for. The education. but I suppose Australian's quite similar to English, like American is as well, quite similar to English, because there's not quite as many inflections or, you know, that those sort of guttural sounds that you don't really have that like you do with a Scouse accent, for example. But I'm fascinated by accents, and I'm fascinated by anyone who can sort of pick them up and repeat them and mimic them easily, because I just think that's amazing. If that, I'd be talking in different accents every day if I could do that.
Yeah, to be honest, I do that quite a lot. And it does mean that my children are now getting to be really good at accents.
Yes. Oh, I bet. Yeah, I bet they are. Are they leaning towards the creative arts then, as career-wise?
Well, my daughter wants to be a doctor,
Oh,
but she
wow.
does a lot of drama as well.
Mm.
And my son wants to be an astrophysicist or an actor. So
Not much difference.
totally. So we'll see. But we both do a lot of drama.
My daughter's at uni doing film
Brilliant.
making and script writing. So I'm waiting for the day when she can make one of my books into a movie. I keep hinting at her, but she likes horror movies. So I don't think unless I turn one of my, unless I turn Coming Home to the Highlands into some kind of slasher vampire movie, I don't think she'd be interested. I don't quite think it'd work, but I suppose the castle might be quite, you could do something with the castle.
Absolutely. Well, you could work together on it, and
I'll work on her. And one last question from Boldwood. They've asked us, can we recommend an audiobook you recently enjoyed reading or narrating?
Oh, well, I really enjoyed. Have you listened or read Lessons in Chemistry?
I haven't yet, but is it good? Should I do that?
It's great, and it's a really good audiobook as well.
Excellent.
I absolutely loved it, and it's one of those because some novels lend themselves to audiobooks more than others, don't they? And it feels like it's really one that really works.
I shall have to make a note of that.
Yeah.
The last one I read, I borrowed it from the shop, from the bookshop, and it was an audio book of Great Expectations, and it was narrated by Robert Powell. So it was quite an old one, but wow, it was amazing. Again, you could really sort of sense how dark everything was and how sort of harrowing some of the scenes were, and that was really good.
That was listen to some classics, because I think that's another thing that works brilliantly for audiobooks, isn't it?
Wuthering Heights is my absolute favorite book of all time.
It's my favorite book of all time as well.
Is it really? Oh my word, that's amazing. But listening to it on audio is just wonderful. I love it. But then again, I'm from Yorkshire, you see, so I have this affinity with Kathy and the wildness of Yorkshire and that stuff.
Because there are probably a few versions of it as well, aren't there?
Yes. Oh yes. There are. I can't think of the one that I listened to recently or more recently. I can't think of I'll have to look it up and find out. I will do. Yeah, I will. Because it's amazing. But as I say, Great Expectations by Robert Powell was also really, really good. If you're looking for something, completely different, really, really good. But what you actually should be listening to is Coming Home to the Highlands, because that's, Eilidh did that one, just telling everybody out there. Oh, because it's fab.
It's so good. It's so good.
It is, thanks to you. No, it is. It's again, it's another experience of listening to your story being brought to life, and it is wonderful, and the setting and everything. And I know you were saying that the set, you quite liked the setting of that book yourself.
Absolutely anyway. Crazy that it's exactly where my mum comes from. It's just absolutely unbelievable.
You see, we were meant to connect in this way.
I know. I think we really were. Crazy, isn't it? I tell people about this all the time. They're like, wow. And Sky, I know. Oh, it's amazing. The picture in the background here is a picture. Yeah. We've got 20 seconds before we finish. I think.
Oh gosh.
But the picture in the background is my the farm that my dad grew up on.
Oh wow! Oh,
that's so lovely. We have. This has been so wonderful, and
this has been amazing. Thank you so much. It's been lovely. It's been really lovely. And thank you to everybody who stopped in to listen to us. Well, listen to me waffle. I have a tendency to waffle when I'm nervous, but thank you very, very much anyway. It's been great. Been really great.
Lovely to chat, and goodbye anybody who's watching.
I don't know whether they're still there or not, to be honest.